All right, everyone. We're going to review for your test tomorrow. It's 25 multiple choice questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep it open all weekend for those people that need a little more time. And the test is not easy. I looked over it, and I thought, to me it was easy, but I think if you're not used to the wording and all of that, it can be actually difficult. And you really need to read. A lot of the material comes from my little lectures, but not as much as I thought. So you really need to read the first chapter very carefully and listen to what I have to say in this review. All right, because like I said, the test is not difficult, but the wording is difficult. So, like I said, this is the first time. If you've never taken an online class, some of this stuff is kind of weird to figure out and to learn this way. So, even if you don't do well on the first test, don't freak out and drop the class because you'll have a chance to make it up. Trust me. But at the same time, it's good to try to do well, do the very best that you can. And I think if you listen to this review, it may take me 2 recordings to get through it. It will help. So the first question I'm pretty much going to give you, because it's one of those according to your text questions, and just to kind of give you an idea of what the questions are going to be like, and this is one of the harder ones. The first question goes like this: according to your text, what 2 issues lay at the heart of Reconstruction? And really, there was a lot. I mean, that's a tough question, but really, according to the text, really it dealt more with the future and economic power for African Americans and the future of former Confederate states, the South, and former Union states or the Union states, and their economic and political relations. And Reconstruction, it's one of those time periods where it's difficult to say. I mean, there's a lot of historians debate issues regarding Reconstruction, how successful it was, things like that. So it's a very interesting time period. One of the things that you want to remember is that, and I always remember that, if I see you around years from now, and I know who you are, I knew that you took this online class, I'm going to ask you this question: was Lincoln's plan for Reconstruction lenient, or was it harsh? And always remember that it was very lenient. In his mind, he wanted to make it easy for the Confederacy to come back into the Union. Many congressional Republicans, however, wanted to make it difficult. All right, and one of the things that they passed in 1864 was the Wade-Davis bill, which was a much harsher plan of Reconstruction. But as long as Lincoln was in office at that time, and he sort of gained more power as a result of the U.S. Civil War. This often happens during wars, presidencies. The executive branch sort of gets more power. He was implementing his plan. Of course, in 1865, Lincoln was assassinated, and Andrew Johnson took over. And his plan was also very lenient. He pretty much, just allowed former Confederate leaders, high-ranking Confederates, to assume positions of power. And, of course, this is something that upset a lot of people. Now, again, both Lincoln's plan and Johnson's plan shared an intent to restore the southern states as quickly as possible. And the people that opposed that were radical Republicans. And once some of these early on in Reconstruction in 1865, a lot of these reconstructed governments in the South, they voted in some of the same people that were involved in the Confederacy, and they started passing laws to restrict African Americans, former slaves, from their civil liberties. And these were called black codes. And this is one of the things that that kind of got a lot of moderate Republicans eventually on the side of radical Republicans, because the moderate Republicans were, they were like, okay, we're cool with Johnson and Lincoln's plan. Again, in the late 1865, it was Johnson's plan. But once these Southern governments started passing these black codes, and many African Americans, former slaves, just became sharecroppers. It was basically at that time anyway the same as slavery, because they would pass these vagrancy laws to where if you were to leave the plantation, they would, when I say they, the sheriff's department authorities would arrest you. And these mostly former slaves, and so they would arrest you, they'd put you in jail, and then the plantation owner would go bail you out of jail, but you would have to work for the plantation owner for so many months. So I mean, it was just basically they started sort of reinstituting slavery in a way, but didn't call it slavery. Okay. So the North interpreted these black codes as evidence that the South sought to keep freedmen in an economically dependent and legally inferior status. And again, like I said, that's what won the moderates over to the radical side. Now, you need to know what the 13th Amendment was, the 14th Amendment was, and the 15th Amendment. Okay? Also, you need to be more familiar, read in your chapter about the sharecropping system. All right? Like I said, many, after emancipation, many former slaves, were just really became sharecroppers, okay, and became part of the sharecropping system. You need to know who won the disputed election of 1876. That's Rutherford B. Hayes. Then you need to know the definition of scalawags and carpetbaggers. The scalawags were Southerners who had remained loyal to the Union during the Civil War. You need to know who carpetbaggers were. They were Northerners who came down in the South for economic and political gain. Now, in the election of 1876, you need to know who won the popular vote. It was Samuel J. Tilden. This is an example of when a president wins the popular vote but loses the election. In the chapter, they talk a little bit about the Ku Klux Klan. And one of the things you want to remember, at least at that time, this was after the radical Republicans were able to take control of Reconstruction. Okay, if you watch Dr. Blight's lectures and you read the chapter and you listen to my lectures, you'll understand that after the congressional elections of 1866, there were enough radical Republicans to override Johnson's veto. So the radical Republicans were able to institute their plan of Reconstruction, which disenfranchised ex-Confederates in the South, and so that they kind of turned to terrorism, basically. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to minimize the power of the Republican Party in the South, and to intimidate people that would vote Republican. And they were, to some extent, they were successful. Now, this is an interesting question. Okay, what institutions most helped African Americans after emancipation? Churches and schools. That's also a subtitle in your book. You need to read a little bit of that. Okay, and so we kind of we already went over this one with the primary purpose of the KKK during Reconstruction. I wanted you to, these are basically the same thing. This should be a question mark here. Also remember that the Compromise of 1877 historically kind of marked the end of Reconstruction. And although Reconstruction, there was a lot of flaw, it didn't end up, at the end of Reconstruction, what we start to see after that is Jim Crow laws being instituted. So and then, civil rights being taken away, civil liberties, freedom, okay, being taken away from African Americans after 1877. You start to see that more in the late 1880s. So to some degree, some historians say Reconstruction was a failure, but it did lay the foundation for the civil rights movement later on. Again, which amendment ended slavery? I want you to make sure you know that. So if you don't know it, look it up. If I just tell you, you may not remember it. Be sure to know who Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner were. They were, radical Republican leaders. All right, and so make sure you just kind of look over. And like I said, I kind of went over that in some of my lectures before. Now, this is like an example of maybe a true-false question. Black codes were used to guarantee black supremacy in the South. I'm not sure if it's worded that way on the test, if it's a true-false or just but I wanted to kind of give an example of that. Of course, that would be false. Black codes were used to guarantee white supremacy in the South, and that's something that you need to make sure that you know. Okay? And just the last thing, remember after the House impeached Johnson, his trial in the Senate ended in acquittal. So what I want you to remember about that, and we kind of skipped around a little bit, but the test is sort of like that. It's not really in chronological order. So I wanted to do that in the review. This is just a quick review. Just because a president is impeached does not mean that he is thrown out of office. All right, so we've had two presidents impeached, Johnson and Clinton. Now, some people argue that Nixon was impeached, and he was. Okay, they were going through the impeachment proceedings, but then he resigned because he knew he was going to be impeached and he was going to be found guilty in the trial in the Senate. So impeachment just means that you're going to have a trial in the Senate. A lot of people mistake that. And Johnson, by one vote, all right, was acquitted in the Senate. Okay, so look, that's just a quick little review. Hopefully with reading the chapter, my lectures, Dr. Blight's lectures, this little review, you'll do okay on the quiz or the test. It's 25 multiple choice questions. Like I said, it's not easy. So if you don't do great on it, don't stress out, but try to do the very, very best that you can. Some people just have trouble at first with some of these multiple choice questions, and this is like I said, it's not easy, but it's not that difficult either. So as long as you study. Now I'm going to keep the test open all week. Okay, I mean, I'm sorry, not all weekend. So you need to do it. If you can, do it tomorrow. But if you don't have time, you can do it Saturday or Sunday. Okay.